So Commonwealth has its roots in the former British Empire, because at the moment 77 countries were born out of British Empire. But out of that, 56 are members of Commonwealth. Not all of them from British Empire. We have former Portuguese colonies, Belgian colonies, and French colonies which became part of the modern Commonwealth. So we have secretariat in London, but we have sub-office in Geneva and New York, where we serve as intergovernmental operation. Beyond the secretariat, Commonwealth has 80 accredited organizations. We have Association of Lawyers, Association of Builders, Association of Engineers. So we have almost all domains which are linked together. What Commonwealth do? We basically do three things. One is politics or diplomacy. Second, we do economic development. And third thing we do is international trade.
We know Commonwealth grouping is not a formal trading bloc, but nevertheless, if we go back and look into the history and the origin of the Commonwealth, as you rightly mentioned, it was a colonial grouping of countries. So there was some form of trade relationship that anyways existed between them. And my role was to go away and look at how these countries benefited. So we did something called the Commonwealth Trade Advantage. We came up with this term going back in 2015. This basically meant that countries of the Commonwealth, which were from different geographical groupings, basically because they were part of the colonial empire and they had common institutions, they had a common language, they had common legal systems. And as a result of this, we found that countries within the Commonwealth, when they traded with each other, they had an advantage in trading compared to the rest of the world, and this could be as much as 19 to 20% of the total cost. So essentially, this is telling me that the Commonwealth grouping that has been created has resulted, which led to formal institutions which are common, and the diaspora, that led to a reduction in cost.
A football match between two countries isn't unusual, but it is actually when it's between India and Pakistan. And I was there to watch the final in the South Asian Games in 2005 between India and Pakistan, and it was a close match. I think it was 3-2 and Pakistan won, but what was extraordinary was not the result, but the atmosphere. And I still challenge anybody who was there, whether they were an Indian athlete or an Indian team member or anybody from the Pakistani in the audience, to still evoke, they'll recall their experience. We had stories of, at that time, the Indian athletes who were visiting Islamabad. They were taxi drivers were giving them, rides without taking fares. Restaurants were giving them free food. The atmosphere when the Indian team went up to receive it was the final, so they were also up to get applause. Well, the applause was universal from across the crowd. And so the point I'm trying to make here is, and Borja, you made this point this morning with others, sport as a unifier, as a reminder, as a rejoinder of what we have in common rather than what we don't have in common. And my friends, we meet in ominous times. Many of us have been arriving here to see worrying headlines in the Middle East as our flights have arrived here about an escalation of tensions there in the Middle East, literally why we've been in this conference in the last 1 or 2 days. But again, it's a timely reminder that maybe through sport we were reminded around the common ground that we need to find.
I co-founded this company called Activo Labs 7 years back, and our entire endeavor is to help people around the planet live healthier, happier lives. Now, why is this a statement? What is the problem statement that we are trying to address? And I'm going to set the context and I'll hand over to the experts in this space, is that I understand the macroeconomic problem statement 7 years back. One of the defining moments of me starting this journey as an entrepreneur in the space of healthy longevity was, I was at a conference in 2015, and it was chaired by, the keynote speaker was Dr. Devi Shetty. It was in Chennai. It was a conference for the Congress of Surgeons. And his keynote to a room full of surgeons and me was around chronic diseases. And according to his research, this is back in 2015, according to his research, by 2030, he said that half of India's GDP would go towards the management of chronic conditions, right? And that, I was like, okay, half of India's GDP, and Modi ji just promised us a $5 trillion economy in a few years, right? And it looked like that's not a business, that's an industry that's going to happen. So something's going to happen right over there. And what was the challenge behind that is just simply a function of longevity.
What we need to understand, first of all, is aging is not a disease. It's the passage of time. And I've discussed that with a number of you in the audience already. And we start to age on day one of conception, day one of life. In fact, your aging trajectory is determined by both maternal and paternal factors that are before you're conceived. And as we progress through time, we become, 9 months old and we're born. So aging is just a passage of time. And we need to consider also that first 9 months of the in utero environment. That also has a big impact on the next hopefully 100 years of our lives. So that's aging. What is longevity? Okay, longevity is not living between 100 and 125 or beyond. It's not about taking supplements. It's the context of well-being as we age across the life course, across the lifespan. And you've probably heard of the word health span. How can we extend the health span? Reducing the risk of these age-related diseases, the multimorbidities, metabolic diseases, type 2 diabetes, all of which are prevalent not just in India but across the globe.
What we've seen in Western countries over the last 60 years, basically just after the Industrial Revolution, food has changed, the way people live has changed, social systems have changed, everything from very basic things such as how much physical activity we get on a daily basis to psychosocial factors. How do we live and treat each other? And we have seen the changes in Western countries, and for a very long time we have assumed, and many colleges and universities, high schools, still teach young people the idea that we are seeing a constant increase in life expectancy. That is assumed to be a given, and that has stopped. We are the first generations that are seeing a decline in life expectancy in Western countries, and that is due to chronic diseases. And we can't stop aging. There's a lot of business, obviously, around longevity, as Richard said, different longevity, anti-aging interventions. Aging is going to happen. The real question is, are you going to age healthy? And how do you prevent diseases? And since this is a sports conference, before we get to any other intervention, exercise really is the magic pill. If you look at the data are very, very clear that nothing comes even close to exercise and physical activity.
So what's the ROI? Does it even bother you? Because the kind of work you have done over the last 5 years, you and Jalaj and your foundation, has been quite stellar. So first comments from Vita Dani, please.
First of all, thanks Boria for having me over. For me, ROI in sports is not really return on investments, but that return has to be in terms of achievements as far as India and Indian sport is concerned. For the first time, if you see Indian table tennis where both men and women's team has qualified, and women's team, as a matter of fact, even reached the quarterfinals. So I think that's the greatest ROI one can ever ask for, besides a medal, of course. And just like it is most important for a sports person to get a medal, for me, the return has to be in terms of performance. When we started our journey in table tennis, there were about 3 men in top 100 and 1 woman in top 100. today, if I look at it, we have we have 6 men and 5 women in top 100. And that itself is a great start. It's a fantastic achievement. And as a matter of fact, my league is going on just now. So I was talking to one of the players, and she said, earlier when we used to look at our draw and we used to say that, there's an Indian in the draw, But now when we look at our draw and we say, oh my God, there's an Indian in the draw, that itself is a great ROI for me.
I need to thank you, Boryada, for this, because you are the one who brought me into Paralympics. And I know you were quite reluctant, I don't know, but you were, very worried that, I'm entering new into sports and you're getting into Paralympic. Honestly, for me, the decision was not why am I doing it. It was more that why shouldn't we be doing it. It's India we are talking about. It's Olympic medals we are talking about, and their stories. I'm really mesmerized at times when I interacted with them during the various interactions we had with the team and with the players who were first going for the Tokyo athletic event, and then we met the team going for para as well. The rest of the Shachi team, which is involved in working with them, have also met them. Some of these athletes are now working in Shachi system, in Shachi sports and infrastructure businesses as normal employees, and they are helping us understand these athletes and these people much more. And some of the stories, and Boryada there knows some of the stories, some of my colleagues who are here have also experienced those stories where they had so much disadvantage in life right from the beginning, or due to some circumstantial reasons. But, for them to be able to achieve medals where in normal Olympics are still not reaching. From day one, you got Boryada, the whole Paralympic team, including our president, Mr. Jhajar, and Rahul Swami, and Mr. Sangwa, and the whole teams and the coaches have said 30, and then I think 25 became a more able time. But honestly speaking, even if they participate and we have respectable performances, it's an achievement.
Two major problems are to be focused upon. First, what kind of talent identification and grooming programs India have, say, in the 21st century. Now, we don't see much has been realized in this particular sphere. You don't have a central sports policy. There are several states in India. It's a mini Europe. So state-center partnership is very crucial in implementing such a policy, either at the school level, uniformly available, or not at the village or suburban level. Although India has tremendous talents in various individual sports. Secondly, sport as an important part of educational curriculum, which again is an appalling failure on the part of Indian education policy. Things are definitely improving right now, both at the level of state policy. India now has a sports policy in the new century. The public-private partnership is growing up.
The main problem that we are facing now is the increase of cyber threats that in the particular case of the sports event are becoming really critical because, we have some examples of these. One of these is the cyber polygon in 2020 has been a massive example of a simulated attack of cyber threats to a network of major events. Usually governments but also private firms, intelligence agencies are concentrated on how to manage sudden threats not only for sport events, of course. I'm thinking to Italy, for instance, we will have the Jubileo next year on 2025. There will be very big events that can be in some way under attack from not only cyber terrorists but also from terrorists. But in a specific case, for instance, high profile events are attracting people that are targeting specific events or sub-events. One of these examples is also the use of ransomware attacks. In the ransomware attacks, for instance, usually people are using them in order to extort money, because they will steal a big quantity of data. It's very much linked to what Dora was saying before me. I did find very, very impressive this overlapping of topics. And of course, an example of this had been also with the Winter Olympics Games in Pyeongchang in 2018. It had been one of the most massive attacks of ransomware spread from hackers.
Sponsorship dynamics, which is apparent not just within a singular sporting sector, but if you look across all examples, we've heard about the Indian Premier League. You think about every football league within Europe and South America, North America, every type of sport, there are increasing numbers of sponsorship dynamics, and within which you will see an increasing rise of gambling companies intensifying their footholds with clubs and certain types of sponsorship arrangements. We take, for example, this season, 24-25, just within the English Premier League, over half, that's 50% of Premier League clubs will have the jerseys, match-worn jerseys, embroiled by a betting company. That's an increase from 7 clubs in the previous season. Why the rush? Well, this comes as the Premier League faces an impending ban on front-of-shirt gambling sponsorships, which will start in the 2026-27 season. Why do clubs want to do this? Well, as you can imagine, they are highly lucrative, and they range just within the Premier League from 6 million to 68 million pounds per season per club. So that reflects the substantial financial stakes involved. There's clearly a rush to contract these deals before the ban comes in. And if you look at some of them, like Everton's partnership with Stake, or Leicester City's partnership with BC Game, which is an online cryptocurrency casino, many of these types of arrangements spark huge criticism from fans and media alike. Many argue that football's close ties with the gambling industry seeks to normalize problematic behaviours and expose vulnerable fans to potential harm.
If we take a basic understanding of strategy, it's a vision, a direction, a goal, a target for achieving some sense of direction of travel. That's broadly what we mean when we're talking about strategy. We know from Stephen Cummings' work in New Zealand, it's got very old origins, going back to the Greeks, and in fact it's militaristic. It comes from the Greek word strategos. So we know where it comes from. It's militaristic in its term. And indeed, when we look at the early beginnings of strategy, it was linear in its thinking. It was do A to achieve B, which will result in C. Quite linear. And you'll see where I'm heading with this. That, of course, probably, if we look at a watershed moment of that thinking, it was around the Second World War, when, to win the Second World War, there had to be a lot of logistics and planning of that nature, and, it very much centred around project management, planning and policy making. But then we start to see the trend I want to point to. And the trend I want to point to is the disruption of the linearity. And this has got massive consequences for where we are right now and where we're heading. So if we look at the work of Quinn and Lindblom in around the late 50s, early 60s, they gave us the idea of incrementalism, logical incrementalism, which really means, you know, you have a straight line strategy at the beginning, but of course what happens is reality kicks in, you bump into problems, you go round them, and then you carry on in the same direction. So what you end up with is a staircase, effectively, line. You don't end up with a straight line anymore.
At one point in time, you remember the 26% was supposed to go to the players. Forget the 26%, it is not even 2.6% of the money that IPL is now generating that is going to the players. So a revolt will happen. Somewhere down the line, the player will feel that I'm being taken for a ride. It is me who's plying my trade and the money is going somewhere else. So do you see this? And that's when the player will say, boss, I'm going to go out and ply my trade somewhere and make money. To hell with the BCCI. How do you sort of see Indian insularity and this player revolt sometime down in the future?
Once the GDP per capita goes up, once the GDP, an economy develops, I think it has a direct effect on the culture. People do become individualistic because families break up, families become more nuclear, and structurally it becomes much more individualistic. At that point in time, I think there will be a revolt. Because again, going back to, I don't want to be like a broken record, but have faith in market, because the market will determine, you can't really cap. IPL has come to this stage because India liberalized, right? Right now, you can say you cannot do this, you cannot do A, you cannot do B, you cannot do C. If you change the goalpost, if you change the rules of the game, there will be a revolt at some point in time, and the rules will change. Just like the rules changed from 5 days to the focus on ODIs to T20 and everything else, the whole ecosystem, it will change, I feel.
We need to highlight the consequences, especially about the racism and the impact on the mental health and consequently on the performance, because organizations, they only focus on performance of their athletes. So it's very important to show them that to achieve the performance, you need as well to look back to the consequences of their racism, or the racism that could also sometimes come from outside the organization. It's not just from the organization itself. It could be from the coaches, from the staff, from the external environment, from the funds. Like I mentioned, the cyber harassment, for example, that's playing a big role today using the social media, and how this could lead to burnout, to injuries, to a lot of negative aspects. So yes, I think that it's very important to look around for how to tackle this challenge, and whether for the external or internal environment, racism source, and which are the tools that we need to advise this organization to implement in order to help to avoid.
My approach is based on the regional development. I'm very much involved in impact, direct impact, indirect impact, and induced impact of all this kind of activity generate in the real business. It's not just the excitement of our fund, but also it's important what money they leave in the local economy. So it's because so much attracted from let me say, the fancy side of this topic. I'd say that I'm interested in attracting sport events to do business. I'm interested in attracting cultural events to do business. I'm very interested in attracting training teams in all the sports to do business as a great opportunity of a region like my region, Italy. For sure, it's extremely vocated to this kind of initiatives because we have great weather, beautiful natural landscape, unique location based on our Greek-Roman heritage, the architecture, you know Italy, and you know that every single spot is a beautiful scenario in which you can invite people to spend some time to have concert, to see, for example, in our Greek theaters in Syracuse, the tragedy, and it's based a very classical event that is every single year made by a foundation and generate a very relevant flow of as a touristic attraction, cultural attraction.
I'm the head of the research lab in Milan, and we have a specific focus on sports and showbiz since a few years. That led us to work closely with some sport clubs and also cultural organizations in the past. In particular, we focus on sports infrastructure, meaning stadia and arenas, and then move forward to the role played by theater, other venues as value creation in the showbiz, generally speaking. This is why we then launched a program that we are managing together with Fondazione Luciano Pavarotti. You're probably familiar with the famous Italian tenore. They've got a foundation in Modena, which is in northern Italy, and great experience concerning live event management. They were pioneering in events which became global events, the showbiz, and they were collaborating with the major players worldwide in that field.
At some point, an athlete, I remember, it must have been my mid-20s, an athlete said, well, doctor, can you help me with this? And it was completely unrelated to orthopedic surgery. So it was nothing related to bones or broken ligament, things that I would fix. And I said, no, I have no idea, and I don't think it's important. Because for us, as orthopedic surgeons, you're just a skeleton, basically, tendons and muscles. And obviously, we're a lot more than that. And I remember going home thinking, why did I give the patient that reply, and why wasn't I able to even recognize the need of that patient, looking at the patient holistically and thinking about the patient as not just an athlete, but a human being. And then started a second specialty in endocrinology, because I was suddenly triggered to learn about the very small molecules that actually make us function and work. The things that happen in our brains, neurotransmitters, small molecules that make you feel good or bad, things that happen every second in our bodies. It's very dynamic, very complex. You're never the same. 8 a.m., 8 p.m., you're very different. We can show that. Brain activity in your blood. And I then started specializing. I've written a couple of textbooks on nutrition, exercise, and I mentioned some of that this morning. How important exercise is, nutrition, for your well-being, to prevent diseases, and it obviously is. And I had another epiphany years later. All of that doesn't really matter if that up here is not okay.
We are no longer in a prehistoric era where we are supposed to run or somebody else will eat us, or we have to run and hunt for food, right? So there has to be an aim. And sports gives us that aim, to compete, to be better at something that is measurable, right? Something that gives us pleasure from winning a point, teaches you resilience. So on one hand, sport is about training you to a level so the average person can say, hey, I need to wake up early for soccer practice. So the first thing it's got sorted in a teenager is going to bed early, waking up early. Great for health. One of the biggest problems we see at our neuroscience clinics is people are just not sleeping on time. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., they're up watching something on Netflix or partying or whatever, and the next day they are wondering why they don't have good attention span. And then they want an ADHD medication. So first thing, sleep got sorted. Second, discipline, right? You don't want to miss practice. Otherwise, you'll start lagging behind. Let's say it's a racket sport or anything. It's a skill-based game. So if you don't practice, you'll be behind. Third, you start looking at your diet. You start looking at what you eat. You want to bulk up. You want to, get your weight down, etc., etc. So just playing a sport at an early age and making it a part of life is really important for your neuropsychosocial development. The neuro, we spoke about the biology of it. The psycho, for a minute, I would just say the mindset, right? It gets you to start accepting life for what it is. You win a match, you lose a match, you win badly, lose badly, you take it in your stride, you become resilient, so on and so forth. And the third part is the social aspect. You build friends who are like-minded, who are thinking about health, diet, exercise, all of it.
I used to fly airplane. I used to be a pilot of private planes. And I tried to do the sky jump because the people I would bring up to do sky jumping, if they could do, I could do. And I did. And I broke this one when I landed, and there's a metal in here. So last 25 years, I live with that metal in here. Now, physical cost is there, it doesn't matter. The problem is the airports. For last 25 years, okay, this month, Zurich, London, and Chicago, Academy of Management, I had to go through a lot of interesting experience, a lot of exercise. They thought there's a bomb in it. Because it looks like a bomb, because my femur, this one, the hip got broken, so I got replaced in Birmingham about 25 years ago. So that is the part of the cost. And this one, this is what I look like, a little bit mustache and,
Head of hair.
And this is all after that.
That scuba picture looks
Yes.
AI, right?
Yeah,
Not you, that's
yeah. Because when I did scuba, there was no photos. So how could I tell you I did that? Yes. And this one I did a few years back. I looked a little bit thin, but up there, this is last year in my university in China. I'm the only one who is doing roller skates in the whole city. Now this roller skate improved it. You won't feel the nerve and the mind, the anxiety, both of them. Very helpful when you're doing roller skate, because if you pay attention to some worrisome things, publications, pressure, you fall down. You hurt yourself. Roller skate will never let you think about anything else. So I recovered. And I'm doing very well with the nerve and with mind and with neuro problems. All I sold myself. So this is the old one before the cast or before the accident. And then I could never fly again. I never flew planes, small planes. Not mine, I'm not that rich. This I do right now, and it helps me. So there is a cost, there's a benefit. Earlier you heard stories of just do exercise and it's all good, but there could be very, very heavy cost. What you were saying, that injuries. I was looking at clinical trials for my case study, for my research, and 40% clinical trials in the world are on athletes' injuries. Psychology and performance enhancement is about 40% total. I have just one thing to say. Don't listen to doctors. My doctors told me, your sciatic nerve, this nerve is called sciatic or sciatica. It will never recover, they said, for the last 20 years. And guess what? My roller skates did. So doctors are not always right.
Thank God I'm not a doctor.
On that,
So I can be partially right.
the only right doctors are the PhD doctors.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they can talk anything and it gets published.
And those are the ones you want on an airplane when you're having an attack.
Yeah.
Who's a PhD? That is bad.